No, at the back. Hello, can you hear me better now? Okay, perfect. Welcome to our symposium on education. It's my pleasure to introduce a brilliant line of speakers, starting with Solange Devernaud from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. She's going to present first, followed by Anaelle Camarda from La University Paris-Cité. And then we are going to have Jonathan Fineberg and Audrey Ellis from the Rowan University, who are going to also give a brief recap. They already talked yesterday, but for the ones who couldn't attend, they're gonna be generous enough to talk us a little bit more about it. And then we are gonna have a discussion panel, hopefully about 30 minutes, in which we're gonna sit over there and discuss the neuroscience of education and how we're gonna have a lot of questions on how this work could be feeding into improve and foster creativity in the future. So yes, I think if the last thing is there will be not much time for questions from the audience. However, I would like to hear your voice. So if you have any burning question that you would like to ask, please, I will be sitting over here, write it in a piece of paper and give it to me, and I will consider how I'm gonna put that in or bring that in the panel. Okay? Thank you so much. So our first speaker, Solange, the floor is yours.
This one is working. Okay, so it's a great pleasure to be here in Paris, and I will take advantage of the French culture to talk about cooking. And actually, how do we bake creative minds? And I will share with you a kind of a recipe that was inspired by a decade of research comparing Montessori and traditionally schooled children. So rather than controlling everything but one variable, it's more like a reverse engineering approach where you just study a population of children that just experience on a daily basis different learning environment. And actually what kind of Montessori learning environment is children enter an environment with didactic material where they have to self-discover the concepts. So there are no grades, no praise, and no judgment about their work. But also they are working with peers of different age range, meaning there is a social diversity and cooperation is encouraged. So this active-based approach is also nice because they don't have any time constraints. They have 3 hours of working time, meaning that the level of stress is quite different from very traditional approaches. And we had a consistent finding. Whatever the approach, we would observe that Montessori school children would score higher on creativity tasks, raising the question of why, what kind of features, and how is education addressing and nurturing the creative potential of children. And I will share with you these, in my eyes, these key factors that matters across development. First is when you have a nice brain dough, it's to let it rise in an environment that is safe in the form of safe exploration. No one will judge my action in the form of valuing my correct answers or devaluing my mistakes. And actually, when we observed through several studies, but I will just share this one, and comparing Montessori versus traditionally schooled children within an MRI scanner, looking at their brain activity when doing a math task, what we observe is that the strategy, the functional connectivity growing behind differ. Montessori school children, whenever they are wrong, you could see that they are recruiting more prefrontal area. So we could interpret this as problem solving, kind of process-oriented mindset. Whereas traditionally schooled children, it's another strategy that might work on the short term, but it's more like whenever I'm correct, I have to remember these correct answers. And you can see that maybe it's already shaping some kind of differences in terms of mindset. And this is important to understand because at this age, school years age, the reward system is quite changing and very plastic, meaning sensitive to the environment. And now we are investigating using diffusion data, the reward system related to dopaminergic secretion. And you have different tracks, but one which is more the mesocortical one. and it's more about evaluation and decision-making, and the mesolimbic one, which is more about valuing and also punishment and reward processing from an affective perspective. And what we observe is that traditionally school children, they tend to fasten and to speed up the signal processing within this mesolimbic tract, which might be reinforced by all the extrinsic motivators they are facing on a daily basis, kind of grades, praise, and also having this judgment about their action, which is maybe not a good point, because if you wait a bit more, this more mesolimbic tract is maybe more meant to have and build self-judgment about our own action, which is more related to virtue rather than value. The second aspect that really matters in our studies is that there is this social interaction on a daily basis, but real social interaction. So we had to discuss work, exchange ideas, exchange point of view. And we can read this thanks to Roger's great creativity and your head knowledge. We could investigate the semantic knowledge network, and you can see that they are more enriched and also more flexible. But also then we went back to schools to observe these children, and in Montessori classroom, they would discuss the whole day long. It's not a sit down and shut up pedagogy. It's really like discuss, gain the meaning of the words you're using. And the final aspect I want to share with you is great. We might have now a great dough, but then take care of the mold, because the mold matters as much as the ingredients. In a Montessori environment, what is the mold? What is the learning environment? How it does evolve and dynamically change across development is that Montessori school children, when they enter kindergarten, it's highly structured. It's a very little degree of freedom where they have to choose and they have to act and imitate the action they observe in a very strict manner. However, while they are growing in self-agency, they are gaining degree of freedom and they are free to choose with whom to work, what to work about. So it's more project-based learning. The pattern in traditional schools is the reverse. Kindergarten years are more about free play and discovering a large environment, not very goal-oriented. And as children grow and supposedly grow autonomy, they lose agency about the environment. So they are more like rule-based learning environments. So you can see that the degree of freedom changed differently across development, which means that the mold might be not adequate in traditional schools environment. And this might impact consciousness because then you lose agency and self-engagement with your environment. That was the next question we investigate. We investigated with Gustavo Deco using some thermodynamic and very complex thermodynamic approach, using the arrow of time, meaning that what happened normally in a one direction could not be reversed, except some actions. And actually, if you apply this to the neural activity here, you can see that whether you look at it forward or backward, you cannot tell. However, some other action and some other neural activity couldn't be reversed. And here you will see a type of actions that you cannot reverse, or you clearly know when it's backward or forward. And they applied the same approach exactly to neural activity, and the less reversible activity means the more conscious and self-engaged you are. And what we observe is that in traditional school environment across development, children tend to be less and less engaged if we use that approach, and maybe they are less conscious about themselves and about their own ideas and their own creative potential as well, compared to Montessori school children, where the mold grows as the child grows. So like any great cake, a creative mind depends, of course, of the ingredients, but never forget about the oven, the timing, and the mold. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Solange. I say that next SfNC, we need to have a cake like that. Thank you. Now, Anaelle Camarda is going to present. Come on, the floor is yours. Is the mouse?
Hello, everybody. So my name is Anaelle Camarda. I'm working at the Maria Montessori Higher Institute in France and relate to the university. So I'm not going to tell you about Montessori because I think Solange did a great job doing it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we have done in PISA study, and especially one part of how we reworked with a lot of different countries for rescoring the data, looking at a frame around the rigidity and the flexibility of thinking. So we all know divergent thinking. And of course, divergent thinking is a matter of try to generate multiple solutions from a single starting point, but across a lot of different paths of solution and exploring many different paths of solutions. Classically, the measures are the fluency, so the number of ideas generated, the flexibility, the number of category explored, and the originality. The problem here is that about the flexibility, no matter what kind of task you use, the AUT, the egg task, or so many other tasks, there are different way of organizing the categories. Sorry, there is a little bit, there is a little problem with the slides, but there are different way of organizing the categories. The first one is that researcher can create categories based on the data. So we have data set and we create the categories like that, which is a good way of doing, but then it is very different from one study to the other, from one sample to another. There is another way where the experimenter can think about different type of categories, even outside of using a data set. Sometimes you can use tests that provide to you a form or a grid to organize the kind of categories that you can find. And sometimes we also have researchers that use more subjective methodology where we ask experts to evaluate how many different categories we can find looking at some different productions, that it can be drawings or others. And so, of course, if I ask you, we're gonna be, I think, next to each other in terms of the number of categories that we see here, but not exactly the same number. So all that is a little bit create confusion and is a problem for replication of the studies and, of course, of the experimental methodology, but also the results that we observe from one team to each other, from one study to the other. So we can really think about creating tools that help to map all the solutions that we will have in one task, and we can do it on so many different tasks. And we can think of flexibility as, on one side, the rigidity and the persistence. So we're gonna just follow one path of solution and deepen and deepen and deepen this path of solution, or we're gonna expand the different type of solutions that we're gonna look at according to the nature of the categories. Mathieu present to you a lot of things that we've done on using those type of methodology. And so, of course, we can do a lot of things as we have a big map of all the solution possible used by children, adolescents, or adults, or across different countries. And we can create those tools using some methods coming from design theory and maybe other tools. And we can look very qualitatively at the different use of each categories, but we can also look at where are the paths of fixation, so where we're gonna explore the paths of ideas, and where are the less explored paths of ideas, and so the expansion part, which would be more creative. At least we think that it would be more creative. I'm not going to go back to the model that we use, but just for saying that we have computed a lot of many different scores that we can use in the literature for looking at the rigidity or for looking at the exploration and the diversity. And actually, all of the score create really two different factors. There is one factor that is really like to the fixation effect, and so the fact that we're gonna dip only one type of passive solution, and other scores that are really rely to the fact that we're gonna be flexible between categories. And flexibility is really rely to the fact that we are able to explore many different type of categories. So what I wanted to present to you a little bit today, because I cannot tell you everything about it, it's the work that we've done with PISA. In 2022, there was a PISA assessment done in many different countries in the OECD, and they evaluated creativity with many different type of tasks. And so a first report came out, a first old report, let's say, came out last year with first results. So Mario Piacentini and Natalie Foster are the head working on the project, and we are four-person French person leading a group of researchers across 14 countries right now, rescoring a lot of the data of children. So there are all data coming from 15 years old children. And we are rescoring it according to measures that we use in the scientific literature, and we refine the measure to try to be the most similar expert and raters across the different countries. And in between of, so here are the 14 countries, in between of the different type of measures, there are measures more subjective as we used to use, more about snapshot of creativity measure and some other based on criterion. And you can find a part of all that already published in recent report that is very qualitative. And I put here some of the names, and I know that we missed some of them, but it implied a lot of different researchers in so many different countries. And I just wanted to tell you very fast about the thing that we are done on using this tool I was talking about mapping everything for creating one big tool for all the different countries that could make it possible, to rate all the different solutions that we're gonna get from the 14 countries. And we have used it in different type of problems, scientific problems, but also social problems that have been presented. And for example, there is one, I'm gonna just show you very quickly some results. There is one who asked for children to prevent supermarket from throwing away fresh food at the end of the day. And so with this specific task, we used the CK theory and method, which is a design theory that helped to really map the type of knowledge that we need to use for generating ideas in that task. So knowing what is a supermarket, what it looks like, what we can find inside, how we go to the grocery store, and all of those knowledge that you can find around, also the delivery chain, how we make the food and everything. And it helped to create all what we are going to call the tree of solution, with the different type of solutions and the different pathway of solutions. And I'm going to go super quick. And what is important to know is that there were people working on the data sets and creating categories from here, but there were also people in France working on the tree as a theoretical based tool. And so we made it encounter at one point. So the tool was really adapted to what we got, but everything was thought with theoretical based methodology, and we end up with big trees like that, and we are using it. So I cannot go more inside all that, and I will do it during the questions. But it's just to highlight that it's super important, and I guess we're all okay with that. It's very important to have some tools that we can share in the community of researchers, but also outside of our community with teachers or with other people that needs to evaluate creativity, and maybe use those tools for fostering creativity in children and adolescents. And I just wanted to highlight that those tools are used in the PISA assessment right now with researchers. It's going to be publicly available. We already try to publish everything on the tools that we use, and you can find that online. And of course, it's been used right now, and it will be used by also policymakers to try to refine the evaluation that they're going to do in next few weeks, years, or whatever. Thank you for your attention.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Anaelle. This is brilliant. So now I'm gonna, without further ado, welcome the next speakers, Jonathan Fineberg and Audrey Ellis from the Rowan University, and they are going to give us a presentation on their work. Here you go. Oh no, you don't have a slide. Oh, oops. Do you know a slide? Where is the slide? Is it at the beginning? The presentation is. It was one slide. There you go. Yeah, just project that on. So I will do. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Audrey Ellis. I'm the Associate Director of the PhD in Creativity at Rowan University in New Jersey. Many of us, we got to see many of you yesterday when we talked about our program. So I'll just tell a little bit about the creative pedagogy that I've been working on and what kind of led me to seek out Dr. Fineberg's work and the innovative pedagogy that's happening in our program. So I'm a philosopher, and I was teaching philosophy classes at New York University, and I was really looking for a way to help my students be creative innovators within methodology itself, that philosophy was a study of methodology and intervening within various types of methodology and not the history of philosophy alone. And that became a very difficult quest in a very, in an interesting way. And one of the things I discovered is that in order to talk about creativity and creative intervention within a traditional academic model is that we had to focus on the body and the expectations of the body within a traditional classroom. So I started developing a series of improvisational exercises to do in my philosophy classrooms. And as I was seeing the sort of benefit of engaging in these, a change in bodily expectation for these students and how it affected their ability to think creatively, I started to seek out other programs that might be putting this at the forefront, that art practices might be at the forefront of all other types of innovation within disciplines. And this is how I came to the PhD in creativity that Dr. Fineberg founded at the University of Arts and now has moved to Rowan University. So since you heard about our program a little bit, I'm gonna turn it over to our founder over here to give a little synopsis of what it is that we do there.
We had a glimpse of why I'm so thrilled to have her. We did talk about this yesterday, and I there's a website up here, and if you want details about the program, you can go to that website and find out more than you ever hoped you would know. But the idea of this is, after 50 years of supervising dissertations at Yale and University of Illinois and other places, and beginning with art history students, but then expanding into all kinds of other fields, I realized that we're just doing it wrong, or at least I feel that we're doing it wrong. Students seem to be unhappy. It took them 10 years. They would learn all the methods and literature that preceded them, and then it took another 10 years to get over this wonderful training they'd gotten before they could really break out of how they were trained and start to do creative work with what they knew. And I thought that was really a bad use of talented graduate students. And I wanted to go back to first principles and completely reinvent how we do a PhD. And I ran into a university president who let me do it. And that was really, it's been a wonderful experience. I thought maybe I was going to retire, and instead here I am taking a new full-time job at the age of 79. But I'm very happy to have a colleague who can carry this forward and also be an interlocutor in this in this process. The objective really is to take all the obstacles out of the way of a student who really wants to do a project. And if you begin to talk to somebody, I ask students from the beginning to write a short 1,000-word dissertation proposal for me to look at. And before they even apply, Audrey and I get on Zoom with them and try and refine it so they get the best application they can give us. And the idea is to try and unearth what it is that really is driving a student to do this project. And these are older students, by and large, students who are already very successful at what they're doing, but didn't quite find a university that would tolerate a PhD that was that was open enough, open-minded enough, you know, to incorporate them. So anyway, that's the idea of the program, you know, is to try and unlearn all the ways that they've been taught to study a problem, and then to help them find people all over the world, which we just hire their advisors. They meet with them every month and they get done in 3 years, and they're all publishing their books within 2 years after they graduate. So it's been very successful, and now I'm glad to be here because I want to figure out why it's working. So I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Audrey and Jonathan. Now I would like to invite the other panelists to come and join. Mathieu, where is he? Have you seen Mathieu? Oh, there he is. So this is, I don't think I need to introduce you. You already seen them talk today. And we are going to start the panel with some questions. I wonder how I'm going to sit there with, you know. Thank you so much. I'm going to sit a little higher, but it's just for the lack of chair. Sorry about that. Right. Thank you so much. So I planned about a couple of questions, but I don't know if we're going to have time to go through them. So yeah, there's a microphone over there. So I'm going to first ask a question and see who wants to speak first. And then we're going to try to get everyone's views on that matter. So one question I think is quite important when you think about education is that a balance between learning the foundational knowledge and fostering creativity. So I would like, you know, to know your thoughts on how do we balance learning the basics. For example, if I want to be a creative pianist, I've got to learn how to play. So how do we balance this with fostering creativity? Is that a relation? Can we do better at education so we foster that?
I think this is so interesting because it's really picking up on a fear, I think, about rigor in programs that are, you know, brand themselves as creative or think of themselves as employing creative modalities, and or anything, art comes into play. Oh, well, it's, you know, we are quick to question how rigorous it is, and the foundational knowledge that a student might be getting. So we come up against this a lot in a way because really a PhD has been thought of to be about content mastery, right? For me, there's a lot of, you know, defensive arguments I could employ here about how rigorous the arts are, in fact, of course, and how rigorous creativity and critical thinking is, of course. And this, you know, I think in any good program, there is a balance at any age of, you know, skill-based foundational knowledge. But I think that we've overestimated the amount of sort of content mastery, or for lack of a better word, memorization, that we should be requiring of our students, that this is going to come naturally through the creative process. And I would personally love to see it de-emphasized in almost every way.
You're making me think of the time I taught for a while in computer science at University of Illinois. And I discovered that all these incredibly talented 19-year-olds would come and they were able to do things intuitively I can't even learn to do. And, you know, but we were teaching them computer languages. And I realized that by the time they got to their 4th year and were ready to graduate, none of them had ever taken a seminar. I was shocked when I realized this. And of course, I did create a seminar for them with problems that they couldn't solve with their languages just to cause a little trouble. So I guess I should say first that, you know, I belong to what Harold Rosenberg used to call the wild man party. I don't really believe in formulas, and I'm always fighting against them. And that's why I'm in the position I'm in. And thank God for Audrey, who keeps me in line a little bit. But you know, well, maybe I should stop it. I could go on, but.
Thank you. Well, I think I think there is always an opposition between heart and creativity and fundamental knowledge that we need to provide to children. And actually, I think this opposition is it's really biased and not true. And but it's something that we hear a lot from teachers, and they always tell us, "Oh, but how can I do to teach creativity because I don't really know what it is?" So this is the first problem. But also, I don't know how to do it because I have too many things to give them as knowledge outside of it. And I think creativity is everywhere in every topic, no matter if you're learning and teaching language or mathematics or biology or some other fundamental disciplines. And so it's a matter of how we can provide the exercise, what we are asking to children, and how we can invite children to think differently and be flexible in that sense. So I would say we can do both, and working with teachers, it works pretty well. So I hope we are going to go in that direction.
Yeah, so I would answer quite similarly to you and just say that it's not either or. I think it's a quite adult perspective on, because we as maybe as adults have experienced like knowledge is duty and fun and creative aspects are more a pleasure. And actually, if we observe very young children, this is one, and how we can just ensure that it's not splitting at one point, that's maybe a question to be asked, taking care of the mold again, and yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm the last, but I agree with all you say. But I think another question is we need knowledge to be creative. So we need knowledge and we need to activate knowledge that was not first activated, or we need to expand our knowledge to be creative. So the relationship between knowledge and even typical knowledge and creativity, it's not an opposition, we need it. And it is one of the issues in creativity research, that all the participants just have to solve tasks with their own knowledge, and they don't have the possibility to use inspiration or to use internet and to explore how they can activate other knowledge. And in the design process, for example, in the design society, it's very surprising that we work with closed word knowledge and only the knowledge of the participant. So given that school is fundamental to increase knowledge, we can use creativity to help us to expand their knowledge. So creativity could be a good tool for increasing knowledge also.
So we started a conversation earlier, which I'm going to come back to, because, you know, the human mind, the brain is the fastest evolving organ in the human body, and it's constantly evolving. And I think that we run a risk when we get very focused on the narrow studies of not looking at the big picture and asking ourselves, how is it that the brain is constructing this reality that we're looking at? And, you know, I just think about, you know, the eye has 1.5 billion cells in the retina. You got only half that many going back on the optic nerve. So something's already going on when you see something. And most of what we see is, as we all know, is not coming from the eye, it's coming from the brain. It's from neural processing. And I think there's this kind of constant dynamic development going on where pieces connect. And that's why I was laughing, you know, we're laughing about the fact that here I am, this old guy smiling about the notion that you have new capacities when you get older. And it's partly because of what Mathieu just said. You know, you have an accumulation of knowledge, and you have a history of putting pieces together, which is profound and is never really lost. And you may lose more of the details, but you also are much faster at putting the pieces together. And I think it's out of practice. It's like if you want to get good abs, you do a lot of sit-ups. And, you know, if you have a history of a lot of neural connectedness and reconnecting, you also get faster at that. So.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we learned that my question was silly because you can have both, but I think that's an important learning. And then going from there, and I think it is very clear that there is no such a trade-off that we can do both. But then if you think about how we then learn, how do we deal, for example, now I'm going to go a little more specific on things like feedback, for example, and I think that links well with the work of a lot of you in different contexts, from children to adults learning, like, because creativity, do we give feedback? Do we let them explore what level of feedback? Do we have any thoughts on this? Are we constraining creativity by giving too much feedback, or not fostering enough, not giving directions by giving too little? So do you have any thoughts? And now you don't all have to talk if you want to pitch something in first. Anyone?
Thank you. I think this is a very broad and difficult question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I start and then you complete, right? There are, I think, well, I'm maybe going to say something that is obvious, but creativity without constraint doesn't really exist, because we have many different types of constraint. We have the constraint of the material, the task that is provided. We also have our bias constraint, cognitive and social biases. And so there are here. The question is more how we can use it in a good way. And so I'm sure you're going to talk more about the example, so I let you this part. But in the design theories, and especially in the CK1, they talk about tension. They create brief that contains different informations that with constraints, and they create a kind of tension in between. So people want to do something with the tension. That's something very design based. And for example, if you ask someone to create a new table, I'm not talking here about the AUT, but we can see it like that. It doesn't have so many constraints. So you can generate as many things as you want. We can look at the number of ideas and everything, but being creative can be a little bit difficult here. But if you ask people to create a table without any fit, then here you have a constraint and something is happening because it goes against your knowledge about the table. And so constraint is very good. And I think it's very, very good. And there is all this work, beautiful work from Katrina Trong that is done right now. And we can really use the constraint and even some constraint from the school domain, because they have time set up, they have the space set up, that they have so many things. So we can use the constraint in a good way. But I think the question is also how we can teach to teacher in some way how to do it. We have some ideas, but also we need to get some information from them also to improve our research on that question.
I would like to pick up on that important point of the constraint, and thinking about your talk as well about how, because in education we have a system that I think emphasizes very well that we go from like traditional system from more chaotic to more structured. But now, if you want to educate for creativity, and a lot of the reward, you've got to create your constraints. So is there a way to foster that they, have to come up with, for example, different questions, problem finding rather than just problem solving? So do we educate for that, Solange?
Yeah, so I can just share. We actually have a study with a traditional school teacher, and they are always complaining about the structure and what they have to follow as rules. And we just played the game of asking them just to change the vocabulary and remove any judgment-based feedback and start being very factual with the children and with themselves.
Can you give an example of that?
Like, instead of saying like, oh, you did it wrong, that's very bad, and say like, oh, it's not there yet, try again. And or as well, not praising them, not saying like, wow, that's wonderful, because then you have children just looking for that experience again, the feedback, the positive feedback. So then just saying like, oh, you used many colors to reach that stage, and just being very factual and observational. And actually within 1 year, just We scanned the school teacher, not the students.
Yeah.
And we evaluated their own creativity. And within 1 year, just changing the vocabulary made them more creative, less stressed. And they could see and observe like a huge impact on the students. So now we are replicating that study to look at more in detail with a higher number. But just to say, changing words can really change the world, and just preventing too much judgment can help as well.
So do you think that by removing that explicit reward or punishment element or positive or negative
yeah,
feedback
yeah.
can improve perhaps intrinsic motivation?
Yeah.
Is
and
that kind of?
Yes, and also
mechanism?
if you feel like it's bad to be wrong, then you are preventing yourself from trying. And actually, being creative is making mistakes. It's thinking out of the box.
So what if you say to the child, I really liked that, what were you thinking? In other words, trying to enable the child to talk about what their thought process is, instead of, you can say, you can be positive, you can be reinforcing, but without necessarily reinforcing the solution. What happens?
Exactly. Orienting
Well,
towards
that's
the
different than what
process.
you were saying, though. You were saying to be neutral. I mean, just in my experience as a teaching graduate students even, you need to be empathic with them, and you need to support them. And, but you also need for them to drive, to lean into whatever makes them happy. That's what you're trying to do.
Exactly, but it's not just adding value, like positive value or negative value, but just supporting them and nurturing their process and try to understand their
Maybe we're
process.
saying the same thing.
Exactly. So it's what I call being factual and observational and empathic in that way. Yeah. So I think it's kind of the same. It's really going in a movement rather than a barrier.
But the words are really important. I mean, to talk about constraints, for example, constraints are sort of a negative quality, right? I mean, why don't we say to somebody, well, what can you do with this? Instead of saying, you can't do this.
My understanding of constraints, as Anaelle put, was more towards maybe the problem to solve, maybe the aim. Yeah, it is. Yes, we have a language difference here. Could you all hear?
Yeah. So the language is important. If the language frames the experience, and if you start to use words that have those connotations, then you're framing an experience which also has those connotations. So
I have so many things to say about that, but maybe you want to, no, I go. I can talk about a little bit feedbacks that we've seen with good and bad, good and bad things happening with children. We were working with Mathieu and other colleagues, with teachers, and they were trying to improve children's creativity in writing. And so they really tried to give them knowledge before. So what is a fairy tale and how it's written most of the time, and how we can modernize fairy tales. And at one point they gave them a story, and they told them, can you please modernize it and be creative doing it? And it was, I don't know the name of this, Le Petit Chaperon Rouge. I don't know how you call that. It's like a fairy tale where it's what? The word red, yes. And so the teacher was here and trying really to get the children to be creative and giving all their energy to do this. They were super happy to know that children could be very creative. But they didn't know how to do. And at one point they say, oh, but you can imagine whatever you want, so you can give examples. And one kid said, oh, but this red person can be violet. And they all started to have different colors. And so all the written story were with someone violet and green and orange and so many other things, which makes it absolutely not creative then. And here, when we worked with them, we tried to get some information about how they give some examples and what can be the impact of the examples. And in that case, it was very nice because it was an ecological way to look at what we observe in the studies. That is that if you give some example in the fixation of the person, then you're just increasing the fixation. And maybe it was not in the fixation of the teacher, but it was clearly in the fixation of the children. And so I think we should be very careful about our feedbacks because we are biased. Everybody is biased. And sometimes giving value on something, like it's good or it's wrong, then it really rearrange the trajectory of thinking and we create some biases. So maybe trying to work more on metacognitive skills more than just value of the ideas. That can be a way of doing. Well, it was not creative in that way because everybody already thought about it and they did all the same thing. And they just stopped there. They could be creative thinking about the orange and then saying that the little girl transform in orange and become an agrom or whatever. I don't know. But actually they didn't do that. They just stopped saying my creative idea was that the girl became orange.
You know, one thing I've thought about a lot is not necessarily whether the feedback is neutral or not, but where's the feedback coming from? So, you know, in a teacher-student relationship, that's a very specific directionality of feedback. There's a hierarchy, there's a power dynamic. I found, at least within undergraduate and graduate students, the more that we can diversify where the feedback is coming from, the more effective it is. So whether it's neutral or not, or judgmental or not, I found really the proliferation of feedback where they're getting feedback from their environment, they're getting feedback from their fellow students, they're getting feedback from outside experiences that are in the context of their learning. So I think that that's another sort of, you know, it seems like we're talking very much about a teacher-student, you know, top-down directionality of the feedback. And I wonder how this changes, what changes about the neutrality or the value and how important that is depending on where the feedback is coming from.
Yeah, so I will now, do you have a response to that or can I move on? So in this context, I would like to know an example from your University of Creativity, like how, because you have people from very different backgrounds in these cohorts, right? So do they have like feedback from their peers, from this diversity of backgrounds? Does this help? How do you deal with that teaching in that context?
You know, when my children were very young, I would sometimes tell them to do something, and they would look at me like they had no idea why I was telling them to do that. But they had enough respect, or you know, there was a strong enough relationship that they would do it, and when they did it, they would find out why I asked them to do it. And I find this with PhD students too. You know, there's a relationship, and the relationship, that mentorship, is very important. I mean, really, to expand on what Audrey is saying, it's, you know, it's diversity. You know, it's a complex world, and you're getting feedback in lots of different places, and the diversity of that's very important. But also, there's a relationship, and I think we want to think about the relationship because it does very much impact how well it works. And with these students, I have students in. Actually, I thought consciously about creating a program in which I could train a PhD student to think differently in a field I knew nothing about. And I purposely did that to myself to see if it would work. Because, and it does work, because you're going right at the creative thought process instead of trying to train somebody in knowledge that they can look up for themselves. They don't need me for that.
Excellent, thank you. Now we have another 45 minutes. So I'm gonna do a final exercise in which I'm gonna give you 30 seconds each. Yes, we're gonna go 1 minute over. And I'm gonna ask a question that I think everyone here would like to know their views on, which is, in terms of neuroscience of creativity, what do you think we need to know that we don't know that neuroscience could help, or are these just blobs that look fancy? You know, do you have a burning question to neuroscience that you'd like us to address, or, you know, that we could think moving forward? What do we not know? I can give you some ideas, but I'll let you speak for 30 seconds each. I'll time it. Who wants to start? I think we start with Matteo there. Yeah, please start. Oh, does it work? No.
So, I think there is many questions, but I have two important things. The first is developmental cognitive neuroscience of creativity, because there is not, except your work, there is very few study on developmental cognitive neuroscience about creativity, and during adolescents and children, it might be very interesting to understand the cognitive process involved during development. So we have to work on it, and it's interesting because there is another society of developmental cognitive neuroscience, and nobody works on creativity in the society. And here, there is few people working on development. So maybe we have to make a connection between the two society, because it might be very important and interesting. And the second thing is the question of social context, because what we observe in laboratory when they are alone, it doesn't really make sense in the context of a class. Where there is a teacher, where there is a friend, where there is social context, and we have to better understand what happened when social context have an influence of which mechanisms. So it's the two line, and the third one might be to develop tools. Not only tools, materials tools, but cognitive tools to help children and adolescents to think about creativity, because they think about mathematics, about whatever you want, but not about creativity, and metacognitive tools might be very useful.
Yeah, 1 second. So for me, it would be to move beyond the single brain analysis and start investigating this collective intelligence and how collectively we are like way more creative than just individual.
Well, they said everything, no? Well, I think there are so many things that we don't know, so it's difficult to answer the question. But if I had to pick one after the 3, 4 first, it would be that I think we need to bound more the creativity domain and the reasoning domain, because creativity is one part of reasoning. In the uncertainty without knowing where we are going. And so there are a lot of beautiful works done in neuroscience in the reasoning domain, could be very helpful in creativity, and the reverse is also true when, especially in the problem solving situations, we don't have the good answer, what can happen. So looking at that in social context, developmental perspective, and would be nice. Yeah.
Well, I love what they're doing, because I think they are complicating the boundary between what is creative, what is intuitive. All of these boundaries need to be complicated. For me, my question is, I want to know what the anatomy of a thought is, and I think that's a big question for neuroscience, and we really need to step back from the complexities of all these smaller or more narrow questions, which are important too, but and keep in mind what happens in the brain when this is going on. What do we have a bigger picture of this? And I think we don't yet.
Such a good question. Overall, I guess I would say right now I would like neuroscience to be leading the charge on just our relationship with our devices physically, as modes of interacting with the world, and how that is affecting how it is we can think creatively.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now we'll finish with 3 minutes over, but thank you so much, all the panelists. You've been brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. And now.
So just like yesterday, lunch will be at the ICM. So make sure you're thinking creatively on your walk and getting lots of steps in. We'll see you there.